Okay, so in this video, we're actually going to go right back into our parking lot request app. And I'm sorry, I thought I had it queued up here, but I do not. So give me a second while I kind of browse to it. So remember in the parking lot request app, we were talking about like how to bring in different makes and models, how we can request different parking spots, badges, validation, and all this other good stuff, saving multiple forms. So we came a long way. So this is what we get with the out-of-the-box SharePoint form. And then we kind of graduated to this view here. Let me kill that one and go to this one. This is where this is a custom app, custom Powerapp form. And then here, you see the validation, then you have drop downs. But now what we want to do, we actually want to take our form UI to another level using some of the UI best practices. So these forms are going to be a little bit more engaging. Here you can see a nice profile picture there. And then you got the badge number, and then you have the date. And you see how I'm just asking for a little bit of information at each step. And then it's here a nice iconic or imagery selection for choice versus a drop down. So you have a lot of these different options. So what we want to do, because I know in the previous video I actually created these using custom forms, but now what we want to do, let's try to create this using the Canvas app, which is going to be like the mobile app version of Powerapp. So this is going to be a mobile app that you can actually work with on your phone, still use SharePoint as the data source, but instead of interacting with it in the list, you can actually interact with this with the Powerapp app downloaded on your mobile device from the App Store. Okay, so let's kind of walk through this. So the first thing we want to do is go to Powerapp, so we go to New, and then we select Canvas. And these Canvas apps, and I know I kind of shot through that selection really quickly, but you got 4 types. You can do custom forms and PowerApps. You can do Canvas apps, which are going to be like your mobile or tablet apps. You can also work with those in the browser, which is nice. It's a pretty good experience. Then you'll be able to do a model-driven form, and that's where if you're working with CDS, where you build your model up in CDS and then use that to actually build a template in their experience right there in PowerApps. And then the third one is building a Powerapp portal, which is more of like an extranet where you can actually interact with folks outside of your organization, outside of your Active Directory, and actually have them log in with like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Gmail accounts and things like that outside of the Microsoft authentication. So really cool options there. But what we're going to do, we're going to just do a Canvas app where you authenticate. We use an Office 365. And here our first option says, do you want to use a CDS, Common Data Service, or OneDrive, SQL, or SharePoint? We're going to use SharePoint, and we're going to use a phone layout. So here I'm going to just grab one of my connections, go to the equipment request site, which is a sub-site, and then here I'm going to go ahead and select the different data source. So here I'm going to select the parking request list. So if we bounce over here, and if I go new, the parking request list, let me just kind of go back. I just want to level set, make sure we're all talking about the same thing here. So if I go to this parking request, this is going to have the list, the columns, and everything that we had that we used to kind of build our other instances. So parking request 4. So once I use that, I get this template here to where I actually have these template screens. What it tries to do is try to set me up with some of the standard flow when you come in dealing with mobile apps and a back-end data source. And we're actually going to skip around these. So let's go ahead and create a brand new screen, just blank. And then we actually want to change our theme. So we just go ahead and select our theme. Let's kind of do the red background because I want the red accent color. So let me just go ahead and select this here. And then from there, let's go ahead and select the fill color. Let's just kind of go with a dark theme as the fill color. And then we want to create this header. So if I bounce back to what we have for parking requests, go new. So now I have like this background image, and I have some text, and then I have the profile pic of the current user. So actually, let me kill that. I keep going back to there. So let me... So to simulate that, what we do, let's just go to components and click new. So the width is going to be 640. So let's just make the height, let's just say the height is 50. And then we'll go ahead and add in a rectangle no, actually an image control. So let's go ahead and do an image control. And this image control is going to hold the icon for our logo. So it's up to the canvas section. And now what I can do, I can go over here and then add in a icon. So let's just go ahead and select the Tesla logo. And then I want to make sure that because this is a component, this is a reusable component, and this is something that we talked about in the previous video. So let me just go ahead and give this a name so that way when I select it, it makes sense. But because this is a reusable component, I want to make sure that the background is transparent so that way it fits well within any environment that it's actually placed in. All right, so I just select that to make that transparent. And now I just go to the screen, go to Insert, go to the custom section here, and then there I can actually engage and interact with that custom header component. Okay, so now we have a logo here. Oh yeah, we probably want to add in the title of this app. So let's go ahead and bring in the label. So let me just do a simple label here. And actually what I like to do, I like to stretch these out to fill in the height, to fill in the width, and then just determine my spacing here. So now let's just call this a parking spot, or let's say request parking spot. That'll be the name of our app. And this is going to float with us at the top in most scenarios, okay? So now if I go to the screen, because I'm using a component, I can update this component and not worry about how many times I'm used it, because if I update it once, every time it's used, that area is going to get the update. And that's the power of components, as we kind of mentioned before. So now what I want to do, this dark color on this black background is not accessible at all. So I want to be able to, for the user to, same way that we did with the transparent background, we want them the ability to change the color, because they may want to use this on a white background or a dark background. We don't know, right? And we want these components to be flexible in that sense. So the best way to handle that, to provide that flexibility, is to allow these components to have properties, and you have these custom properties here. So let me just create a custom property to where the user of this component can specify the text color. So here, let me just go text color here, description, let's say color of the title. And this is going to be an input property type. You can have input or output, as we mentioned before. And the data type is actually going to be color. And what this is going to do, is you can pick text and have them pass in the color code, and you can leverage that as well. But if you select the data type as color, what this would do, this will allow them to, it will actually allow them to use the color picker to determine that color. All right, so now if you see here at the bottom right, I have the text color selected. Now if I go to my label and go to the column property for this particular label, instead of the RGBA hex number, I'm going to actually specify component header. So you do the name of your header, dot, and then the name of the custom property. In this case, it's going to be color. And it looks like it's going to default to black, which is fine. So now that I have that, if I select my component, and now you see that custom property there. I have text property. And then also here on the right pane, you will see the color picker. And that's germane and natural to how you select colors in the out-of-the-box components. And now you can take advantage of that with your custom components. So now that's nice, giving them full control over how this renders, which is great. Okay, so from there, let me just keep bouncing over here. So we deviated from the header a little bit. That's fine. So here we want to do hello, then the current user's name, and then some other static copy. So let's just do that. So to do that, let me just hit the plus sign and then hit the label. That's going to bring this in. The best way to handle these, you can go end to end. This is actually what I would recommend. Give it the whole width of the viewport, and then you can come up here and specify the title. So here, let's just say welcome back, and then the name of the current user. So this is going to be user, and then dot full name. So you use the user method, and then from there you use the full name property, and that should bring in the current user. And again, we have that issue with the dark color on the black. So let's go ahead and adjust this. So let's go ahead and make sure that pops with the white. And then we never know like the length of the names that are going to be inside of here. So let's center it and then just give it the whole width. So that way, you know, we kind of cover it that way. So now we have the message. Let's go ahead and drop in the profile pic. So to do that, I need another image control and just select this guy here. I think this is going to come in with the dimensions 320 by 320, which is fine. We do want that to be a circle, so whatever your width and height is, you want it to be a perfect square. That's why those numbers match. And then the border radius, you just want to match that pixel number, and that will make it a perfect square. Okay. So once we have that, we want to fill this out with the current user's profile pic. So here we just do user and then image. Again, PowerApps makes this extremely easy to do, and there is my image there. So welcome back to DeShon. There's my photo, and then let's do the static copy, which is another label. Let's go ahead and order your parking spot. So let's go again, stretch this out, and then come here with the alignment, have that centered, and static copy. Let's reserve your parking spot. All right. And then once you have that in there, again, I like to center these. And again, this is going to be mobile. So on mobile, the expectation is that you have all this real estate to play with, and you kind of want to take advantage of that. And you want to make sure it's thumb friendly. So unlike when you're dealing with custom forms, where you have like the mouse and keyboard, here you're doing everything with your finger. So things, and for the most part, it's going to be a little bit larger. All right, so let's, here's my action button that's going to go ahead and trigger me to the next screen. So let me go down to the text property here and specify let's go. Exclamation. Right? So once they click this, oh, you want to put a little curve on there. Those buttons are too flat. So you throw a little border radius on here. I usually do very subtle border radius, maybe like a 2 or 3. That kind of gives you just enough round, not necessarily square, but nothing too round either, right? Because you don't want it to have that peel look. You want to kind of have a square, but just a little bit off the edges. All right. The only other thing and this is more, you know, personal preference, I don't like the header not being separated from the body, right? So what I love to do is, let's go back to our component. I like to do like a horizontal rule or something like that. So let me select the component, give it a little bit more breathing space. So I'm going to change that height from 50 to 55. And then what I'm going to do is hit this plus sign, bring in the rectangle control. Again, you don't have lines here, so there is no stroke or lines within PowerApps. The rectangle, you have to use a rectangle with a small height to give you that line effect. So I'm going to do a height of 2. I'm going to select on this, go ahead and have it at the bottom, take the border off. You don't need a border on this. And then what's the right color for this? All right, let me go to my color here. I don't know. Let's see what the red looks like before we adjust it. Because, you know, once you start looking at this in context, all right, how do we do? Something's off. Nope, we didn't, for some odd reason it didn't show up. Is 2 too far down, or what happened here? Is 2 not enough height? Let's do 4. And then go to the screen. All right, so let me readjust this to its height. All right, nice pinstripe, nice red pinstripe. Okay, so now that we're happy here, this is going to be our, we can kind of tinker that a little bit, but this is going to be our border. Now let's go ahead and get this moving to the next screen. So for the next screen, I'm looking at these out of the box ones that we have. So we have that detail, we have this edit. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and blow away the browse. And I expect that you're going to get these red exclamations popping up, because what's happening is that by default they have formulas tied to these screens. So when you delete them, the formula breaks because it's referencing something that no longer exists, right? So here it's looking at for a gallery, for the selected item. Okay, so let's do a couple of things before we dive in and actually start buttoning up this form and screen. The first thing we want to do is get our naming convention right. And when you're talking about screens, especially because what we're going to do is start navigating or bouncing between these screens, we want to make sure our naming convention is correct and it makes sense. And so here we want to do a screen main, because this is going to be our main screen. And to ensure that this is the screen that the user hits when this app first loads, you want to go into this app control here, and there's an on start event, and just tell it to navigate to that main screen. This is how you ensure that the starting point that the user should start based on how you're structuring your app, you have full control over that. So they're going to start here, even though this screen may end up being the last screen in the list here in this tree control. We're forcing that because we're saying when this app first load, navigate to here, then they're going to start here. So now once they start here, they're going to click Let's Go, and we want them to go to the next screen. So if you look at this, these screens, we actually have several steps here as we're using like this wizard-driven form. So it's going to be step 1, step 2, step 3, and that would be my recommendation. So instead of calling this, I think the first thing we ask for is like the badge number. So instead of calling that screen badge, let's call it screen step 1, because that sets you up to where if this changes, like if you meet with the client and they say, no, they actually should probably select the parking lot first, or they may change the experience, or they may rearrange things, your naming convention still holds true. So regardless of what's in step 1, we know that that's going to be the first step. So, you know, it's just one of those lessons learned, especially once you go through maintenance cycles and see how these things can work. So let's do screen step 1. And you want to do the same thing for the form that's actually inside of the screen. And you notice my naming convention, I start with the type of object that it is, so form step 1, and then I do the name, the unique name for that particular control. So prefix it with screen, prefix forms with form, prefix buttons with buttons, and so on and so forth. All right, so here we have form step 1. So now what we want to do, we have to get this screen looking like what our main screen looks like. So I'm going to delete all of this boilerplate, and then in my edit gallery, it's still looking for, oh, okay, so this is the issue that we ran into before. So let me scoot this down. Let me bring in my custom component. So I go insert here, bring in the custom component. But you see that? You see how we're doing the light background versus where we started off with the dark background. So that flexibility in that component allows us to do that. It defaults to black, but we can, as you saw with that custom property, we can control that. All right, so now here I got the form. Let's just go ahead and scoot this up, not too close to that border because we still want that border to have breathing room. And so the first thing we need to do with this form is ask for the badge number. So to do that, let's just go into edit fields from the form control and remove everything except for the badge number. Or we can delete this, right? We delete it entirely and then just bring in a new form. So we want to bring in, if we go to our forms gallery, this is going to be an edit form because they're going to be interacting with it. And this is good because there's so many times that when we're interacting with PowerApps, it creates our form for us and it does a lot of things behind the scenes. And what is good for us to go through is to understand what's actually been done and how we set that up if we have to redo these steps from scratch. So I'm just renaming this back to my naming convention to form step 1. This is my new one. First thing it's asking for is the data source. So my data source for this one is that parking request 4. It's actually the only data source. So if I click on that, that's where you get your data source name if you forget it or you're maintaining someone else's and need to figure it out. So now we have this selected. Now it wants to know which item are we going to bring these columns in to represent. So in this scenario, they're requesting a new request. So these items are going to be brand new. We're not editing existing ones, right? So in order to specify which item you're going to interact with, you go to the item property. And there is a cool method out here called defaults with an S. And there's, both of them exist. So it's default without the S and defaults with an S. It's going to take in the data source. So here we go, parking request 4 as the data source, and that's going to be defaults, and then you will select that. In defaults, it's going to set up the initial default value for this data source, aka a new item. So that way, as we interact with this form control, and if we add information and if we do our patch process, it's going to create an item, and defaults is the one that makes that happen. It's the difference between creating the item or updating an existing item, okay? So now we have default, so we have our item selected. This form control is now primed to bring in the different fields. So the first field we want is badge. Actually, that's the only field that we want, right? If we're looking at this, it says enter your badge number. All right, so the field name is going to be badge number, but we want to make that display name a little bit more verbose. So enter in your badge number, okay? And you can play around with the casing to make this fit or for whatever best practice you're following from a user experience piece. All right, so then for this data card, we can have, because we have all this real estate for that the data card is now, and we're only dealing with a single column. So now what we can do, we can stretch this data card out to give us a little bit more height so that this doesn't feel like a form item, right? Or a line item within the form control. We can space it out this way. We can have that asterisk there because it is a required field. And then the other thing we want to do, if you notice here, if we bounce back, this does not allow for characters. So I'm typing the characters in, but you can see they're quickly being removed because it only is set up to only allow for numbers. So to do that, you want to select the actual data card, which is the text box control. Sorry, you want to select the text box control, not the data card. So this is the data card, this is the text box control. And then you want to go to this drop down and I think it's format type or something like that. Yeah, it's called format. And then here, I think you only have two options. I think it's text and number, right? So we want to do number, and that's going to force that. All right, so once we have that, and here's another thing. You notice what I've done. Pay attention to what I'm doing here. And this is going to save you when you get to saving this information. Because what's going to happen for each one of these steps, we're going to have a form, and each form is going to show some site columns, other site columns, or wherever the case may be. I'm always representing my data entry using a form, right? Versus, and this is key, and this is something that I see a lot, and I think it's a huge mistake because it makes your formulas extremely nasty, versus bringing in this label, right, and bringing in a text box input, right, and then painting this all up and naming these and then going to patch for each one of these and mapping it to the site column, yada, yada, yada. You don't have to do any of that if you use the form control. So anytime that I'm interacting with a text box where I'm actually saving data, I try my best to do to use multiple forms. And we saw in the previous video on a nice formula that allows you to save multiple forms without having to specify each and every field in that form, right? It's magical. So this is one of those things where we understand the API, we understand the tools in the toolbox and what's available to us, and we're making it easier for us to interact with and easier to maintain, right? All right, so here's my button. Let's go ahead and drop this button on here. And here with this button, it's going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to give them an option to go next. And once we have that, oh yeah, actually, let's not do that. Let's reuse something that we really have. So the question may be, why are you not making your buttons components? And I think we talked about this in the previous video. We don't make our buttons components because there are some validation formulas that we need, right? And when I say validation formulas, we don't want this user to proceed to the next step unless the required field is populated. We're not going to pepper that in now. We're going to save that for another step. So let's just wire these up. But that's why these are not components, because we need access to adding formulas in the on select outside of just the navigate. All right. So here, let's go previous. And then, so I have my previous and next. And then here, let's go ahead and drop the color. Right. And then for here, we just want this guy to navigate to screen main. Look at those nice, pretty variable names or control names. And then this one, we want this to go to screen step 2, which does not exist. So let's go ahead and create that. So here I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate the screen. Just push it up to kind of keep things in order. So move it up, rename it. And then the form, rename it. Right. So now let's go back to our step 1 screen and then have this navigate to step 2. Screen step 2, put the fade in there, and then that's it. So now to test this, I hold on the Alt key, then hit click, and there we go. So now I'm at the other step. So for the other step, we wanted enter in, when do you need your spot? So that's going to be, again, so this is going to be the form 2. Let's go edit field. Let's remove this guy. And let's add in start date. I think that's the name of the column, start date. Yeah. So we're going to drop start date in there. And then we're going to we have to unlock it because we want to change the display name. So let's unlock it there. So let's say, when do you need your spot? And then have the date control there. All right. And again, you want to, ideally, so I'm eyeballing all of this, but ideally what you want to do, you want to go ahead and get some coordinates, right? Where your X and Y's for your label, what's your X and Y for your control, and match those up. So as the user bounce between screen to screen, everything is consistent as far as placement. Of course, the field names are going to be different, but you want them to be consistent as far as placement. All right, so one of the things I do not like about this is that it defaults to that 12/31/01, but we know how to fix this, right? So if we go to the default date, this is going to be parent.default, but here we can put some smarts in here that says if parent.default is blank, so if is blank, you want to default to today's date, else use the default date. And this default date is going to be whatever's entered in, today is a method. All right, so this default date is going to be whatever is entered in if they're reviewing this submitted request, right? So if they come in here and select 8/21, hit save, the parent default, when you open up that particular item, it's going to be 8/21/2020, right? So that's what that logic is. So if it's blank, default to today, else use the value that was specified. And then that's that. All right, so when do you need it? All right, so now let's just go back and confirm our experience. So let's go, did nothing. Why did let's go do nothing? Let's do our on select here, confirm what it's set to. Oh, it's never set. So this should go to step 1. So let's go to navigate, screen step 1. Let's put a fade in there, and then let's go. So, and then that should take me to step 1, step 2. Oh, that's not right. Step 2, previous button should go to step 1. All right. Okay, so this is step 1. Let me collapse these so I'm clear on which screen I'm on. That's step 2. That's step 1. And that's main. All right, so our navigation is working correctly. All right, so next video, what we'll do, we will go ahead and put let's continue building this out. So parking lot, this is tricky, right? So before, this was a drop down to where, pick your parking lot. So here with this enhanced UI, we're exploding this out to have icons to represent the different parking lots, right? And then the one that gets selected get a nice checkbox so it's clear on which one is selected. A nice enhancement. So we're gonna have to tackle that. Then we go next, and we have something very similar to when we start selecting special needs. Again, previously that was a drop down, but now with this enhanced UI, that's something that that's a little bit more fancy, and we'll walk through those too. And then we'll validate that, okay? So hopefully this was helpful. Again, you know, it's a few more steps, a little bit more effort to create these enhanced UIs. We're not just stuck with forms and listing of controls and things along that way, right? That UI is definitely functional and it gets the job done. But if you want to take your PowerApps to another level, either a Canvas app or a custom form, then you can enhance the UI and get a little bit more fancy in it. All right, so that's it for this video. See you in the comments section, and we'll chat soon.